and just go. We're going to hold the meeting, the regular meeting, until we have a quorum. So in the meantime, we'll just go right into application review. So why don't you kick off, Chris?
Okay. So the first application on the agenda is 314 Wilson Avenue, CAM application. The applicant, Crystal LLC, requests to reestablish and reopen a farmer's market and beer garden previously approved in 2011. The farmer's market and beer garden was in operation for roughly three years until closure in 2014. The previously approved on-site commercial kitchen establishment will provide space and a venue for roughly 50 chefs, bakers, and caterers to showcase their culinary creations. So are there any representatives from anybody to represent this application?
Yeah, Liz Suchi's on.
Hi, Liz. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Mr. McDonald. Thank you very much for reading that synopsis, and it covers what the proposal is. If any of you are not familiar with 314 Wilson Avenue, it's the large, low building that's next to the Sono Ice House and about one property away from where the city's bus depot is for the school buses, and across the street from Commerce Packaging and the Norwalk Transit District. There are a variety of tenants in the building right now, one of which, as was mentioned, is a commercial kitchen that is for all permits. What the proposal before you is, again, is to reestablish and reactivate a farmer's market and beer garden that had been in operation for about 3 years, from 2011 to 2014, and generally the same location that was originally approved in 2011 and then modified in 2012. It's about 5,000 square feet outdoor space area, tables and chairs for patrons who will then be able to have something to eat, have a beer, sample some of the creations that the chefs inside the building are able to create. And then hopefully during the spring, summer, and fall, taste and take home some of the farmers market fruits, vegetables, and other baked goods, things of that nature. So there's no new construction, there's no new building. This area is sandwiched on three sides by existing structure. And if Michelle has any opportunity or could possibly screen share one of the photos, it would be exactly clear as to where this is. If you're traveling southbound on Wilson Avenue and you pass the DHL building on the left, you'll then see a brand new warehouse building that was constructed within the past year. The very next entrance to this property, if you look down the entranceway on either side, there's parking. Straight ahead is an open area, as I said, sandwiched around in between three sides of the building. And that's where the beer garden would be, in that location. Initially, it's scheduled for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday operation with limited hours. But if things go well, the concept would be to expand the hours in 2022. The project has been reviewed by all city agencies. As a matter of fact, last week, the zoning commission reviewed and approved the project. But since your meeting takes place after their regularly scheduled meetings in July, it's come to you afterward. That's the long and short of it. If you have any questions of me or Mr. Grasso, who is the representative of Crystal LLC, the owner of the property, we're happy to answer them.
Yeah, I've been there before, and when it was in operation, it was a very clean operation. I think the commission is pretty familiar with the property and its adjoining properties, because we've gone through many iterations of cleanup over the years, and new buildings and new structures and drainage and the like, whether it was formerly his property and now someone else's, it's all tied in. And that's a very ideal circumstance and location to where he had it. And I think the bar, and there was a wishing well and some pergolas, all that's still existing. It really hasn't changed from an outward look. They're just going to reuse the old use that they were approved for.
That's exactly right, Mr. Romano. Exactly right. To the, I guess, the southeast of the property is Village Creek, the tidal marshland. There are recreational shellfish beds in that area, but they're closed to recreational shellfishing. Again, there's no reason for this use to, in any way, shape, or form, be conducted behind the building. It's confined to that area, whereas Mr. Romano aptly pointed out, there's a pergola area, a well in the middle, and a bar that's been there since it was in operation and since shut down in 2014.
Anybody else have any other input? If not, I'd like to make a motion that we move it into to full commission for a vote later on in the meeting. Jeff, you had
Yeah, wouldn't the vote just be that the commission would have no objection, since it's not expected that this would have any effect on the harbor management area or be involved with any of the policies of the harbor management plan? So just the commission would have no objection to this proposal.
that sounds appropriate. We just need to move it forward now with no objection.
There was, the application references the list of abutters who were contacted, but that wasn't included. Were the people, the properties on Split Rock contacted as abutters?
Yes, Mr. McDonald, all property owners whose backyards abut Village Creek, which were directly across the way from our property, were notified by certificate of mailing of the submission of the application on or about July 2nd, as well as the commercial property owners across the street. So it was approximately 15 property owners on Split Rock from one end to the other, directly across from this 30-acre parcel.
Okay.
And just one bit of information, I appear before you rather often because I've always been taught by my former mentor, Frank Zullo, that if the property is within the coastal zone, it must come before the Harbor Commission, whether there are harbor issues or anything of the like. And that's why you see me. Perhaps others don't do that, but that's a throwback from the days of Frank Zullo. So perhaps you're wondering why are we here? But so that's the reason.
But that's much appreciated. But as you say, the projects by law and statute have to be referred whether they have impacts or not. So my thought was if there's an impact on the harbor that's affecting the harbor management area or involves the harbor management plan, the commission could find it consistent with the plan or inconsistent. And if there's no adverse impact or expected to be no impact at all, then I think the proper finding would be to have no objection.
Right.
Because, you know,
And I think for others, I mean, you honor the rules and regs, and rightfully so. But for others, our jurisdiction is within 1,000 feet of the waterways. So this certainly falls within that as well.
right. And the statute that triggers the 2/3 vote, requirement of 2/3 vote of the planning or zoning commission to approve a project that has not received a favorable recommendation from the Harbor Commission. So that's another aspect of the review. So well, we appreciate your appearance before the commission. It helps very much.
The only issue I would find with this would be no issues of noise with live bands and alcohol being played adjacent to a residential neighborhood, but it's not really within this commission's purview. Although I think that maybe need to be addressed by somebody.
And for your information, Mr. McDonald, that was addressed by the zoning commission. And among the conditions of approval, noise monitoring is going to be required to be placed on the site. We also have to provide a acoustical analysis prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, and that acoustical firm has been retained to undertake its work and to provide that analysis. We have to abide by the city's noise ordinances, and that was something that the City of Norwalk Health Department made clear in its recommendation of approval as well.
All right.
John, can I recommend a motion to move this forward?
Well, if we don't have a quorum, we can't make motions, so we will.
It's in committee.
That.
Just a recommendation then at this point, Chris?
That we move it full to what we're doing is, with no objection, we're moving it forward to the full commission. Because we're light one person for an official vote.
Actually, Dennis is on, John.
Dennis, are you here?
I see.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Dennis.
And so is John Crespo.
So is John Crespo now. Yeah. Okay. We have a
Yeah.
quorum.
Okay. So did you guys hear this application at all? You, Dennis and John?
I was familiar that it was coming up, but I didn't see the application.
Well, the presentation was made. It's just pretty much as it's written. And from committee, we were going to move it forward to a full commission for a vote. But now we have the full commission on. So would someone want to move it to, you started, Matt, if you want to move it to a vote.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why I'd mentioned that whether there seems to be 8 or more of us on now. So can we move that forward?
Yes, in a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? No objection noted.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and enjoy the upcoming weekend. Appreciate your spending time on this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate it.
You too.
All right. The second item on the agenda is we discussed it last meeting, so I won't go through the whole description of it, but it is the One Manresa Ave in South Norwalk, COP. This is submitted by Norwalk Power LLC, and this is for the wetland sediment remediation. We had a letter that was forwarded to Deep, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. I guess we wouldn't. I don't remember the content of the letter. I do remember that John included the observation that I made that the culvert head wall had been eroded around and shifted and was no longer attached to the culvert, which drains these two wetlands that are part of this application, and that we thought they should look into that and see, in our opinion, it needed to be addressed, and if they agreed. So I don't know if we have anybody speak to that here.
Yes, good evening. My name is Bob Spooner. I'm a Regional Environmental Supervisor for NRG Energy. Also joining me is Sean Connery, who is Environmental Director for NRG. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I thank you for pointing out the culvert deterioration. It's been a long time since we've been offshore looking in, so we will certainly take a look at that and repair as necessary.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that the letter, Chris, was to express no objection to the application moving forward, but also asking for the opportunity to have a discussion as we're having now with the applicant to learn more about it, and reserved our right to provide additional comments after the discussion tonight.
Mhm. Okay.
Can I share my screen? Michelle, will you allow me to do that?
Yes, you should be able to.
All right. This is an aerial that I took. I think this might even be in February of this year, or it's 2019. And so is this the area that we're talking about for the remediation?
Yes, so there's two. All right, so we'll go with that first. So there's two saltwater wetlands. One is right where your cursor was there, between the fork and the
Yeah.
access roads there. And another one is to the west of that, to the east rather,
Okay.
to the east. So another one is there, and kind of, I'm pointing at my screen, you guys can't see my finger, but the other one is just to the left of your cursor. You can see a cleared area in the trees adjacent to the other wetlands, the road there. Those are the two saltwater wetlands. The freshwater wetlands are this clearing that is farther to your left. It's a very small clearing, goes straight down from there. Oh, right there. That's where the freshwater wetlands are. And there's really no surface transfer from one to the other there. They're likely connected by groundwater. But so we're going to remediate the smaller freshwater wetlands as well as the two larger saltwater wetlands.
Is this the drainage outfall that Mr. McDonald was talking about?
I don't think so. I think what Mr. McDonald was talking about was on the westernmost access road. You can see the water going underneath. I
Yeah.
think
Right
that's
there.
where the culvert is.
Yeah.
The other thing you pointed out there, that's the discharge from the power plant, the Cirque water discharge.
That's right. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And another question, if you don't mind. Several years ago, we looked at a proposal that you had for, I believe it was a pilot project for remediation with plantings. Was that up in this area here?
I think that maybe what you're recalling was we did a pilot study for the wetlands remediation. It's a big, expensive project, and we wanted to make sure it was going to work. And the DEP wanted to make sure it was going to work before they approved the RAP. So
Oh, I see.
in the eastern of the two saltwater wetlands, we did a small pilot excavation to determine whether our remedy would prove successful, and the pilot study confirmed that. So we then put together the official RAP and
I
went
see.
forward with that.
Okay. I have another, let's see. This one.
This is a good picture.
So this is the discharge from or it was the discharge from the generating facility. And all right, well, the plan, of course, harbor management plan supports the environmental remediation of degraded areas. Does this work have any potential conflict with what we heard is the Department of Transportation's at least planning efforts to utilize this property during the railroad bridge project?
No, we should be able to conduct this wetland remediation simultaneously with any DOT use of the property. They intend to use the barge slip and some laydown area right on the southern end of the property, and we should be able to conduct this remediation, no problem, even if they're on site.
And when would the project begin?
Well,
the remediation project.
Right. So we're going through the permitting process. You guys have been provided the DEP permit application, and we're grinding our way through that. There'll be town wetlands and planning and zoning applications to follow once we complete that. There is certain time restrictions because of the presence of the turtles and other critters. So I think that the earliest we would start this project would be probably next summer. At the earliest. There could be other things to delay it, once we have all the approvals in place. The earliest would be next summer.
Well, I believe that I guess the only other thing that we might want to mention is that you are agreeable to looking at that outfall that Mr. McDonald identified to see if there's any work that's needed to correct that or repair that.
Of course. I think that outfall is important to the remediation as well. That'll be we'll have to use that as a barrier to make sure we don't get loose sediment running away out into the sound. So we'll for sure take a look at that and repair as necessary.
Will that repair have to be part of this application? That's more of a question to.
No, that'll probably be a separate application. This application just covers the RAP. So to the extent we have to repair an outfall, that'll be a separate project and a separate application.
Yeah, it looked like there was a fair amount of erosion on the embankment of the roadway there.
Mm-hmm.
The distance between where the back of the head wall should have been and the embankment of the road there was quite a lot of the material had been washed away.
Yeah, I haven't been on site since I saw those pictures, but then next time I get down there, I'll certainly take a walk over and take a look for myself, and then we'll start the process of getting that repaired.
That was a particularly high tide when I was out there. I live nearby. I just kayaked over just to have a look, and I expect to see that, but I was actually out kayaking for another reason, just decided to go over there, but yes. So it's probably not, to that extent most of the time, but it was, there was literally a whirlpool of water going down into, presumably into the pipe where it had separated from the head wall. Instead instead of flowing through the head wall, because the head wall had shifted, it should have been vertical and everything else, and backfilled at that point. So, yeah, my guess is you have a bit of work to do there.
Probably so.
And if you don't mind, just maybe one other question that I might have. When you do the remediation work, will you be required to monitor water in the outside of those discharge areas during the work? Will there be any monitoring in the harbor required?
I think so. I think that'd be a better question, or a question better answered by, our LEP. But I can say we did dredge remediation at our Devon station in the Housatonic River, and that it was the same sort of hydraulic dredging. We dredged the material into those giant socks.
Yeah.
And you end up having to make a containment, and then you set up a temporary wastewater treatment system to
Yeah.
filter the water and get
Yeah.
it back into the river. So I am fairly certain that we would do the same with this. The dredge material is contaminated, so we want to place it in the tubes, and any water will be treated before it's released back into the environment.
All right. And I guess you don't know where you would take this material to be disposed of or to be placed?
No, we haven't determined that yet. Some of that will be based on post dredging sampling,
Yeah.
just to see, exactly what we have for contaminants, the concentrations of the material that we remove, and that'll determine where we send it.
So the plan is to basically to plug up the culverts so that there is no, tidal wash going on during the dredging. It's not really whatever you call it, dredging or excavation work, right?
I think so, but don't hold me to it, because we're gonna use hydraulic dredging, so we'll place a small dredge in there, that's essentially like a 18 or 20-foot John boat, and goes around like a big hydraulic vacuum. So it needs some water in there, but I'm
Right.
not sure of the exact way, I'm not sure exactly how the water comes in and then doesn't go out. And so I'm going to stop there before I say anything more that
Sure.
embarrasses myself.
Well, I was because if you plug your thing at high tide, then you'll have plenty of water in there, and then if it rains, then you'll have even more water than you want in there.
Sure.
So I don't know if you were going to have to de-water the area to actually do your work, and the
No.
de-watering would also have to be run through your frac tanks and everything else, whatever else you're doing there to, your to process the water on site if you're going to do direct discharge back to the sound.
And the section that there's water in now, when that's done, will there be water there as well, or you're filling it with sand?
Oh no, it'll look exactly the same, 5 years down the road. We're going to remove the sediment and place new sediment in there, and then we're going to restore the plants. We're not going to change any elevations or anything like that. So it should appear essentially just like it appears now. It'll just won't have the contamination that's present in there now.
Right now, are you just remediating to a predetermined depth?
Yes.
And it's not to where the actual contamination goes down. It's more of a capping.
Yes, that's true. We're going to remove the top 1 foot and replace with 1 foot of clean sediment, clean new sediment. The benthic zone is the top 6 inches, so the DEP was satisfied with removal and replacing of the top foot.
Now, in any, depending, obviously, it'll depend on whatever future use that property has. So there would be a likelihood that more deeper, in-depth remediation may have to take place?
I don't think so. You know, I think is in terms of wetlands, it's unlikely that the wetlands will be
Built
developed.
that anyway, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
and I think that the remedy we proposed and the DEP accepted is a you know, forever remedy.
Even in the upper area where the clearing is, where the
Yep.
tree lines are, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the cross section of it, John, so that most of it is will be wet at high tide. Now, I don't know the elevation of the invert of their outfall, which will determine how far it's drawn down in a low tide, but the bottom of it looks like it's at mean low water. So if the outfall elevation is at mean low water, then it would dry out to, run out to a mud flat at low tide, and then it would be flushed every tide cycle.
Is there any testing or anything, Chris, that based on because that's like a filter system, that ground that's there. And it filters out through the tides, high tide, low tide, it keeps filtering. And I think I read where it had some sort of metals in there from the fly ash. Is there contamination attached to that would have an adverse effect?
In this, I don't know where the contamination is and where it is on that area. The fly ash was, I think, mostly deposited in the sort of wooded northeastern corner of the property. But, there's heavy, there was coal, that's coal side, there's heavy metals, stuff leaches. It's up to them to do their,
Right. Essentially the whole wetlands is contaminated with common historical coal ash contamination, which is arsenic and nickel and aluminum and chromium and whatnot. We have done sampling in the sediment outside of our property in the harbor area in the past and found no significant impact on the sediment outside. We do know the wetlands is significantly impacted, which is why we're remediating it, but it doesn't appear that the contamination has impacted outside that broken down culvert.
Joe, is that true? There's no fish out there with 3 eyes? Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Spooner.
Sure.
This is John Crespo. Will you be collecting samples outside the remediation area to make sure that there won't be any cross contamination resulting from the excavation?
I am not sure what the plan calls for in regard to surface water sediment sampling outside the remediation area. I would have to get back to you guys on that.
Yeah, because that would be good. You want to make sure that during a rain event or some other situation, you don't want to cross-contaminate from the material that is being exposed and removed.
Good point, John.
That might be an additional recommendation we provide to DEEP now. After this discussion, that we recommend that DEEP require appropriate monitoring requirements during the work.
During and after.
Yeah, during and after.
Yeah,
Yep.
are you going to craft a motion or recommendations?
Yeah. I had just 2 other questions. I know I said only one before, but to Mr. Spooner, is this work being done in response to an order from DEEP, or what is the?
No. So this property is subject to the Transfer Act, and NRG accepted the environmental liability for the site upon purchase, and we're marching our way through the site, and it happened that wetlands was one of the things that we knew. With the plant retired and the future use of the site unknown, wetlands remediation was one of the things we knew had to occur, essentially no matter what the future use of the site was. So
I
that's
see.
why this is the first thing that you guys have seen, the first remediation you guys have seen at the site.
So there'll be more remediation work as time goes by. Is that?
Yes, that site, because of the contamination, will be subject to soils remediation, and that would likely be done in conjunction with any kind of development in the future. And it's likely going to require groundwater contamination too, but we are still defining the nature and extent of the groundwater contamination on that site.
Okay. Now, you mentioned, you just described the site as retired. Is that the same as decommissioned, or is that something different? Has the plant been formally decommissioned now?
Now, so this is the environmental guy talking. The plant is decommissioned in that you couldn't start it up tomorrow or even in 6 months, but the equipment is still there. It would take, well, first of all, it would take changes in the market that bring the need for that plant back into play, but it would also require significant infrastructure upgrades to bring that plant. For example, the fuel oil tanks are cleaned and out of service and have Bobcat size holes in them. Bobcat, the tractor, not the animal. And all of the piping that attached the fuel tanks to the power plant has been removed. For example, so it's decommissioned in that it's not going to be started up anytime in the near future.
Aren't they making future plans? I mean, hasn't Eversource run a line up to within the plant itself to connect to that line underneath the sound?
Well, that line always existed. The substation on that property is the terminus for the Long Island, the line to Long Island, and
Right.
That substation is still fully viable. It's not really part of the NRG machine there, if you will. So all of the Eversource stuff is still in play as
But
much as it ever
Eversource has
was.
increased their capability to run through that substation.
Oh, sure. The demise of that station was due to the Eversource installation of the 345 line into that area.
Well, as you can imagine, the Harbor Commission is quite interested in what the future plans for the property may entail and the effect on the harbor. But I guess that's a ways off from us thinking about now. Future redevelopment plans.
Yeah, I know NRG has no future redevelopment plans. I think they would. That's all. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, there's an RFP. It's public knowledge, an RFP on the street for development plans.
Right.
Whether that's a negotiating tactic with DOT is for everybody's speculation. But
right now, we're just concerned with comments on this certificate of permission application. And maybe one comment is that our understanding that culvert or the work at that culvert would be looked at and addressed as necessary through a separate permit application or a separate approval application. And that we also would recommend that DEP impose appropriate requirements for monitoring during and after the project to ensure that the remediation work doesn't cause any adverse impact on environmental quality in the harbor. Something like that.
Would it be would it be most appropriate that we move this from commission to consultant to formulate and give it some real thought, and then we vote on it as whatever that motion is, or do we want to form a motion now?
I think because this is a certificate of permission application, John, unless DEEP is going to ask them for additional information, and I don't know that they've done that, Mr. Spooner. If DEEP has asked you for additional information, that they can approve this quite expeditiously. So I don't think we want to wait until next month, but if we have the sense that we want to craft a recommendation having to do with appropriate monitoring and addressing the issue that Mr. McDonald mentioned with the outfalls. The Harbor Commission receives, if there are any progress reports or status reports that they be shared with the Harbor Commission.
Yeah, Jeff, would it be appropriate to require that the dewatering or the water treatment installation, the water treatment facility that they install to be able to handle, besides to handle a storm event, so that storm water that would make its way into the partially dredged area would not, end up overflowing and being discharged directly into the sound?
I think we can say something like that. I would assume that DEEP would be, recognize the need to do that, but we can also address that in a comment.
Yeah.
It sounds like the approach is going to be what was similar to what was done in the Mill River with the Exide project. They call those tubes geotubes, and they had a small craft that pumped the sediment directly into the geotubes. The water drained out into a basin. It went through a treatment plant, and it was monitored by DEEP. And then when the material dried out, they cut up the geotubes and put the material in trucks and took them to landfills that were appropriate given the character of the sediment when they cut open the bags.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it would certainly be sized to handle the operation, which they have a control of. So anything that leaches out of the geotube, they would process. But if you have but since you're taking an area that they used to drain to the sound and making it a closed system during the extent of the dredging, now this closed system will capture any rainwater, and all of a sudden you may have an extra 2 or 3 feet of water there, and or then they might have to de-water their area to effectively do their dredging. So I don't know. I don't know if it's required to do dewatering and handle rainwater events or not. It depends on how they design this.
Well, we could have a general recommendation for DEEP to ensure that the capacity of the work is sufficient to not be adversely affected by storm events or something like that.
Yeah, handle dewatering due to storm events.
Yes. But I think that the commission would say that this work is, provided it would be consistent with the harbor management plan's policy to encourage remediation of degraded intertidal resources.
Yeah.
So I think we could find this consistent with the plan, with those certain understandings having to do with monitoring and planning to deal with stormwater events and dealing with those outfall structures.
So does someone want to move this forward?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that the language, that the recommendations Jeff just voiced would be sent to DEEP as our recommendation letter.
And is a second on that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody against it? Abstentions? So moved. So Jeff, you craft some notes and craft it, and I would think that Mr. Spooner has gotten the gist of what our overall meanings and what we're looking for.
And then what yes, it's Ms. Mizell at Deep. I'll call her tomorrow and alert her that our letter will be forthcoming and that with these comments.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you to the representatives of NRG that came tonight too. It was a big help to have this discussion compared to the meeting last month.
Well, thank you for your time and really good questions. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, Chris, next application.
The next application is 20 Shorehaven Road, COP. So when I spoke to John this morning, we just received a copy of the certificate of permission that was the permit that was issued by Deep on the 22nd, so just last week. So I don't know if it's a moot point for us to discuss it because the permit has actually been issued.
I guess this was them being called to task because what they had was not permitted because it predated any requirements at the time. And then they were taking parts and pieces of the ramps and they were storing it on wetlands. And I guess that's where this all came about, that they had to now come into compliance, correct?
I don't know the history of this site.
Yeah, that's what I read, Chris. So
Okay.
it seems like it's an existing dock. It's not going out any further than it was before. I think the elevation of it may have changed, not drastically, but minutely, because they did mention that. And that, John, are you going to speak on that, John Helps?
Yes.
Happy to do so.
Yeah.
So,
Give John Hiltz for Mr. Bob Mitchell, the applicant. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. The thing that set this off, apparently, actually, it's an old notice of violation that was issued to the former owner. They never enforced it. They never sent it out. So Mr. Mitchell, bought the property, inherited the notice of violation. Enforcement people were doing, field work, stopped by, had a good conversation with them. He was very, very agreeable to, making things right. You're correct. They've been storing the floating dock back behind, the island there. And the ramp itself wasn't in the wetlands. It was simply there's a little land spit back there as well that they kept the ramp on. In any case, Deep required them to apply for a certificate of permission to retain it. We did that. And in addition, we modified a couple things to make it a little less impacting. It used to be held into place by like 6 anchors were holding the floating dock in place. So what we did is we proposed a strut system that would be wed to the existing concrete footing there. And that would take that impact out of the picture. And then in addition, the former owner who built the floating dock, he was actually a sculptor, I think, and he welded all this stuff up. It was a pretty phenomenal piece of work. But the floating dock was welded aluminum. It was basically a box structure, if you will. The flotation formerly sat on the bottom of the box. So the entire floating dock area basically sat on the bottom with the flotation. What we've done is the dock builder, GNC Marine, is they modified the float to move the flotation up to underneath the decking. And in addition to that, at Jamie Sidoriak's recommendation, we also put in some, basically, for lack of a better term, float skids at each corner of the frame so that the only bearing is really, I think it's a 2 foot by 6 inch wide piece of wood at each corner. So it knocks down the overall impact on the bottom greatly. So this was all, this was all, again, just Mr. Mitchell taking care of a former owner's notice of violation.
So what would our finding be, Jeff? That this is consistent with the harbor management plan, or?
I don't know that there's any room for us to make a finding now because the approval has been granted. So that's the case, right, John?
Yeah,
Mr. Hill?
they issued the COP.
The COP.
Yeah.
The only thing I think we might have recommended is that on the drawings that the littoral property lines be extended to show the distance between the dock and the littoral property line.
Right.
That might be something we want to say, just mention now in terms of future applications that.
Right, for consistency, for consistency.
Our policy has always been to include the
Extended line.
extended littoral
Yeah,
property line.
I think, Jeff, the only reason I didn't do it this time is just because the Deep recommended just leaving it where it was as opposed to moving it. And I don't know if you're familiar with the structure itself, but there's I think it's a 6 by 15 foot concrete block holding up the waterward terminus of the pier. So it wasn't really an option for relocating it, if you will. It hasn't proven to be a problem for all these years, but I understand, your desire for consistency on the plans.
Yes, not to criticize you and the project, but just to remind Deep that our policy has always been to require the extension of the property lines. But otherwise, we would have, I don't believe, have any objection to the issuance of this. John, it corrects a violation that wasn't the fault of the current property owner.
Right. Yeah.
But I think we need to move it with that, letter
Yeah.
going out in
Right.
terms of overall. And so as the case is stated, and with Deep really approving this prior to it getting to us, even if there were littoral issues, they'd be moot anyway because of it being existing and for many, many years without any issues. But having those lines on the plans lets us know that.
Yeah, and then this is a certificate of permission again, John. So Deep is not bound by any,
Normal.
statutory period before they can act or to get comments from the Harbor Commission. So
Right.
it behooves us to get comments as quickly as we receive a copy of the application.
Right.
But we can make that comment to Deep.
All right. So who wants to move that forward?
I had one quick question for you, John, before we just move forward. On the overview drawing, is there, I'm not sure if we should show any of the other moorings that are, pursuant to that area that are, I think the neighbor to the west has 2 moorings that are, I believe, now in front of that property or somewhere in proximity to that. I grew up on that dock when it was a nice sculpted piece back in the 80s and 90s. So, but now there's a number of other boats that are in that area. So I didn't know if that has anything to do or should be on a drawing or should be noted.
I did, when I was out there, I did not observe the moorings. They may not have been put in yet. I was there pretty early on. That being the case, usually the moorings in that area would be under the direction of the harbor master, I think. So I don't know that, there was one there or not there, approved or not approved. I can't speak.
No, there's 2 that are approved. And the only reason I have any knowledge of is I'm the harbor master over at Spread Island across the way from it. So
Right.
Someone came up to me and they're like, hey, what are you putting all these moorings over here? And I said, I have nothing to do with it. So, and it's, like a 34-foot center console and like a, 32-foot center console. So they're kind of out in the water skiing passage area. So
Right.
I had a couple neighbors come to complain to me and I said, sorry, I have nothing to do with it. So
Yeah,
I just didn't know if that had anything to do with
I don't
the
know
property.
about those, do you think, let's see, I don't think that do you think they're the adjacent property owner or couple down?
I'm not sure if they're directly one next to or 2.
All right.
It's somewhere in that area.
Right, because 2 down is the Stieglers, it's Eclipse LLC. So I don't know if that's theirs or if it's the people next to them.
Jeff, you wanted to weigh in?
In response to Matt, I may be able, if I can share my screen. Let's see. Is this the drawing you were talking about, Matt?
Yes, so basically at the bottom right portion of that drawing, that would be where those moorings are, bottom right to bottom middle.
Yeah, those weren't there. There was nothing there when I was out there.
Let me ask a quick question about littoral rights. Do we extend the littoral rights perpendicular to where the property line intersects the shoreline? Or is it just an extension of the line on the same bearing as the property line?
Exactly right.
You can do it. There's a lot of ways to do it. You know, having talked to a couple admiralty lawyers, I mean, generally people extend that straight. You're right. There's a school of argument, I guess, if you will, where the intersection of the property line with the mean high water line, it then goes perpendicular to that. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah. Because that would be significantly different than that eastern property line there would.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. It's one of the, I did have a brief discussion with Jamie Sidoriak about that. I just said, you're okay with this where it is? She's like, we don't want it relocated. You know, you can see on that plan that Jeff is sharing.
Yeah.
There's basically, there's basically a recess in the wall that the pier itself doesn't come off the top of the wall. The pier, it's kind of like, there's a little well there where you walk down into it and then you walk out onto the pier.
Right, and that 8x15 concrete footing is pretty substantial.
Yeah.
You're not just gonna move that.
It is. Yeah.
But Chris, there are different, I don't know completely what I'm talking about, but there are different surveying methods for determining the extension of those littoral property lines, depending on the configuration of the shoreline. I don't recall the names of some of those methods, but I know there are different ones. And if the property is concave, the shoreline, for example, you know, there's a surveying method that's used to do that. So there are specific methods for determining the extension of the littoral property line in surveying standards, or surveying standards for doing it.
Right.
But is there then a need to put in some sort of a comment having to do with the proximity of the moorings?
Is everything a moot point now that the COP has been issued?
I'm assuming it is because, you know, the horse is out of the stable now. The COP has already been, and then again, I'm not looking to bring up any issues or curtail any of these or cause any problems. I just want to make sure that any of these drawings that are going forward are valid, and just in case any other neighbors or any other people come to us or to John or anybody else to say, hey, well, this happened. How about this? Just for clarity.
Yeah.
But I think we can bring up the point about, you know, to be consistent with our approach to other projects, that in the future, DEEP should ensure that the extended littoral property lines are shown according to the appropriate survey method. That would be the appropriate survey method.
Okay. So I think this was moved to approve something that's been approved already, but with comment.
Make comments. I wouldn't say
comments for the littoral lines.
Well,
comments, yeah.
Well, it's a general comment to DEEP because there's no making any specific comment is a moot point at this time.
Right. All right. So let's go on to the next project.
Yeah, 26 Shorefront Park, pre-application. So I think it's the first time we're seeing this. So I'll read the description out. Now, Mr. Andrew, forgive me here, Vignalt, proposes to dredge of 5,826 square foot area to 8 feet below mean low water with a half a foot of allowable overdredge. A portion of the proposed dredge area has been dredged under COP. And we'll read that out. No documentation exists that demonstrates that the rest of the proposed dredge area was ever dredged, although it has been used for private dockage for several decades. Dredging will be conducted by a clamshell method using a crane on a work barge to remove approximately 1,173 cubic yards of sediment. Dredge material will require testing to determine suitability for disposal in Long Island Sound. The applicant as a coastal resource analyst, Peter Pellegrino, I see that person is on the call, conducting macrobenthic community structure of the habitat around 26 Shorefront Park. The study characterized the existing benthic community as stage 2 structure, which according to published criteria is conducive to rapid benthic recolonization after dredging. Study results concluded that the proposed dredging area should recolonize at the same current level within 12 to 18 months following dredging. So there's the dredging issue and in general for that area, and then there's the impact on the benthic community as a related topic. John Pinto really wanted to be in on this conversation.
Yeah, it's almost 7 o'clock. I'll give him a
Yeah.
call, see if he's about to join us.
Why don't we take a 5-minute recess while we're trying to wait for John? And we'll continue at 7:05.
Okay, sounds good.
If not, then I would just like to move forward with it.
Okay.
Anybody want espresso?
John is logging in now. He's finished with his exam or the class that he was teaching, so he will be on.
Okay, I see that Dr. Pinto is with us. So it's take yourself off of mute, John, and
Okay, you'll have to fill me in on where we stand here.
all right, where we stand is we're just about we're to start the 26 Shorefront Park pre-application.
Okay,
So why don't you just take over from here? It was explained.
Yeah, John, I read the text in the
okay.
agenda.
All right,
so-
well, why don't we take it from there? I know we have Mr. Bajek here, along with other representatives. Is it Mr. Casey and Mr. Pellegrino? You know, and if you want to review that application for us, I know you want to carry out a dredging project in that particular area. That was previously, as I understand, not dredged before, but as I said, like to hear your response to what might be some of the concerns that we would have with regard to dredging. And, you know,
John, I can give you a background of, what we've done to date, just to kind of, set the stage
right.
on things. We did initiate a pre-application meeting, pre-application conference with the DEEP, and had some conversations with them about what we're proposing. And they do know that we're moving forward with the consultations with the other agencies. We've sent them out to the Army Corps, Shellfish Commission, Harbor Management Commission, the Bureau of Aquaculture, and Division of Fisheries. And we've received comments from the Division of Fisheries and Bureau of Aquaculture so far. And we also met once with the Shellfish Commission.
Right.
And also, Attorney Casey put together kind of a summary of what we're proposing, and the study that Dr. Pellegrino did to evaluate the benthic environment in the area that we're proposing to dredge, as well as an area just outside of the area that we're proposing to dredge, which included the nearby South Norwalk Boat Club, which was dredged, I believe, in 2014. And then he also collected samples in an area near the proposed dredging, but areas that were untouched and adjacent from where we're proposing to dredge. And I don't know if everybody's had an opportunity to review Mr. Casey's letter, but it pretty much.
I think that came through today, as a matter of fact.
Right.
At least from my standpoint, I didn't have a chance to sort of, I glanced through that, sort of reiterating, I guess, what Mr. Pellegrino had found with regard to the rehabilitation of that particular area following the dredging. Yeah, I guess, like I said, this is the first time that we've come across, or perhaps the second time we've come across, again, the rehabilitation phenomena. But I know that the entire area around that has been reserved as a shellfish resource. And that's certainly of a major concern to us, to preserve the integrity of the area for maintaining a shellfish, the substrate. It's not just the shellfish that are there, but it's also the substrate that area provides for feeding of shellfish in the neighboring area. Because it might be 50 feet away or 100 feet away, but it still serves as a main source of nutrient for that particular area. So.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is John Casey. I'm a
Yes,
partner with the law firm of Robinson and Cole. I was hopeful that everyone would have a chance to read my letter. It's really not a summary of Dr. Pellegrino's work. It's a
well, there's also incorporation of the material based on what's in the harbor management plan, and yes, right.
Yeah, we read it. I read it. Pinto did. Others as well.
I want to start with the misconception that's common throughout the state, that a residential property owner can't dredge at his property or her property. That's just simply not true. It's sort of baked in for some reason to Connecticut coastal management policy. But that concept was challenged, and probably it was baked in because for years DEP would send out letters that said there's a policy against it. In 2008.
But the policy against dredging for reasons, explain what? What were the reasons they gave?
There was a misconception that there was a policy against new dredging at residential properties in Connecticut. It was based on a number of letters that the old Office of Long Island Sound programs would send out that said, basically, we have a policy against new dredging at residential properties. In 2008, an owner in Greenwich, Southport.
No, but I'm trying to get at, what was that policy based on? Was there a scientific rationale as to why there was no new dredging?
No, it wasn't a policy based on science. It was a policy based on, and there was no policy. I guess the point I want to get to is that the concept that there was such a policy was challenged. And the DEP commissioner at the time, so if someone filed a formal petition for declaratory ruling to the commissioner and asked her, this was Gina McCarthy, do you have a policy? What's it based on? What's the legal underpinnings for that policy? And she said explicitly, and it's in the footnote, we have no such policy. And I could read from the footnote again. She said, applications seeking authorization for such dredging, that's dredging at a residential property, like the application submitted by the petitioner, are accepted, reviewed, and judged on their merit in accordance with the applicable legal requirements. So we had this hurdle with the Shellfish Commission where members are like, but it's new dredging. So like they couldn't even consider it on its merits. And I just want this commission to know that you should consider this on its merits, not and not dismiss it out of hand simply because it's new dredging at a residential property.
No, I basically understand that. My question is, based on that policy alone, I have no problem with new dredging. I think dredging is good in certain areas, but there are other extenuating circumstances. And my concern, well, not my concern, just based on basic shellfish principles of the needs of special area that we have, which is a special resource, special area for resource for shellfish, is basically all of roughly Norwalk area is reserved as a shellfish reserve based on some 1884, I forget the exact year of that.
1882 map.
82 map. But the point here is that shellfish require a certain amount of nutrients. Now we have a particular type of water, green water. We don't have ultra blue water, and our water is not pristine clear based on the principles that are used for clean water. We got a B+ or B, I forget what was the letter that we got, because our water has algae in it. Our algae is important for the feeding of shellfish, and that's what we're here to protect. And what my concern is, not just based on no new dredging policy, but we're here to protect shellfish resources. And I certainly agree with my colleagues as far as the shellfish industry is concerned, that the substrates, even though there's no shellfish present in that area, areas adjacent to shellfish provide the nutrients that are needed to feed subsequent areas of the shellfish that are nearby. So that's the premise that I'm going on. So I can see where the new dredging might have an impact on that, just as prop dredging would have an impact on disrupting the surface and disrupt the surface altogether to prevent shellfish from sitting on that substrate. So I don't know. I'd like to hear the scientific rationale that perhaps supports that. Maybe Dr. Pellegrino could probably fill me in on that and showing how that nutrient is going to be disrupted. That's going to help supply the nutrients for shellfish in that particular area. Not that we have new dredging just for dredging's sake, but how that might disrupt the entire ecosystem in that particular area. And if you says it takes a year, I think I saw it takes a year to refurbish again. That's a little delay in time for perhaps.
Well, it says a year to 18 months, but Dr. Pellegrino is probably going to speak to us. I had the pleasure of hearing him
Oh, okay.
at the Shellfish Commission, and I think we should all have the benefit of that. And I know Shellfish does want to weigh in. They're the ones that have, since their meeting, gone further and.
Yeah, well, no, well, as I said, Mr. Casey, I agree with you on the standpoint that what the policy is. The policy, as far as the state is concerned, that they apparently have no policy for new dredging. But what I'm concerned about is we have let's say a policy as far as disruption of the shellfish resources. And what we need to come to an understanding about is, will that new dredging disrupt the shellfish resource to the point where it's going to disrupt the industry in that particular area?
But we have a policy, John, to protect shellfish, to protect important shellfish resources. It's very clear.
Yeah.
In the harbor management plan.
Right. Well, I'll introduce Dr. Pellegrino, but I'll do a little prequel. So
yeah.
any activity in the coastal zone is going to have some impact.
Right.
The permitting criteria that DEP looks to is, are we going to have significant adverse impacts? Are we going to have temporary impacts? I mean, even putting in a pile is going to have an impact on shellfish resources. It's going to remove part of the benthic environment. But is it reasonable to allow, one pile, two piles, three piles? Is it reasonable to allow dredging? You balance the impacts against the benefits and against the rights of the applicant. So I just want to keep in mind the big picture here. So we are talking about 5,800 square feet of impacts. And without giving anything away, taking anything away from Peter, but they will be temporary impacts. I don't know the full size of the harbor. So the impacts on the shellfish resources are going to have to be judged on what 5,800 square feet cause. And it also has to be kept in mind that for some uses, such as the South Norwalk Boat Club, there are hundreds of square feet, hundreds of thousands of square feet that are dredged with the same, per square foot impact that we're proposing here. And those projects are regularly approved. So, I don't want us held to a different standard than the boat club is or any other project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Peter, because he's not only has he done this study, but he can tell you himself, he's been studying the waters of Norwalk since the 70s and the shellfish industry there. So I don't think there's any scientist with a better perspective on the impacts on the harbor than Peter does. So with that, I'll turn it over to Peter.
Yeah, I began studying Norwalk Harbor back in 1975 as a volunteer with the health department under that direction at that time of Dr. Kalman. He had a person that was working as a biologist but didn't have the means to do any sampling, and as a volunteer I began to study Norwalk, and I've been basically studying Norwalk Harbor ever since 1975 on a regular basis every few years. The last time I looked at the harbor was, at least the original stations, was back in 2016, and I just resampled them 2 weeks ago. So maybe that's the last time. I don't know, but only time will tell about that. As far as the impact of nutrients on the shellfish, I mean, it really doesn't make any difference why the dredging is taking place, whether it's maintenance dredging as far as the South Norwalk Boat Club or new dredging. I mean, we looked at it was like a living laboratory. Part of the sampling site was the area that was dredged back in 2014, and it has come back to its original status. I mean, you couldn't tell the difference whether, if you looked at the samples, whether you were looking at an area that was dredged or an area that wasn't dredged. So, I mean, the impacts are the same. I mean, there are certain unavoidable impacts that are going to be faced anytime dredging takes place, no matter what the objective of the dredging is. You're going to have destruction of any of the organisms that are in the path of the dredge. And the question is that going to be a permanent situation, or are things going to come back? And it's unfortunate that in Long Island Sound that for some reason, over all the years that I've done all of this, the state has never required anybody to do a follow-up study as to see what is happening. I mean, how long does it take for stuff to go back to normal, if it goes back to normal? We have to base our conclusions on areas that were done outside of Norwalk. But here we have a living laboratory where we know in 2014 the area was dredged and we know what the conditions are. So as far as your comment, I mean, as far as nutrients go, it's not the dredging in itself, except for the temporary impacts of the dredging itself and the disruption and sediments in the up in the water column and turbidity and all of that. Once that settles down, as far as plankton goes and nutrients to feed shellfish, in my opinion anyway, and let's face it, it's only an opinion, it's not going to have any long-term, it's not going to have any long-term impact on any adjacent areas of Norwalk. And you know, I mean, how can you just have to make that judgment on professional experience. And what else can I say? That I don't think there's anybody that's studied Norwalk Harbor more than I have. I mean, I don't know of anybody that's looked at it beginning in 1975. So, you know, I don't know if the Harbor Commission has ever gotten any of my reports. I mean, that's not my responsibility to submit the reports. We did it with the health department. We had 2 years of community development block grant, which reports were submitted to the redevelopment agency. We've had projects that were funded by the Seaport Association, King Industries. But when the reports are done and they're submitted, I have no control over who gets them or who sees them or what. So, you know, I don't know, but I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
I'd like to add one thing to what Peter's saying, and that is we have a private boat dock here that has been in use for decades. I don't know, I forget how many decades, 30, 40 years at least. This area's definitely gotten shallower over time. Everything does in the harbor from siltation. Right now, we're dealing with water depths 1.5 to 2.5 feet at this dock. At extra low tide, it's even less than that. One thing to think about is if no action is taken, this dock is still going to be used. And over time, it's going to get shallower and shallower. And when the boats bring their boat to the dock or leave the dock, they're going to end up stirring up the bottom with water that shallow. And that's going to create turbidity. And I don't know how many times that's going to happen, but you have to evaluate that over the need to have a somewhat deeper area so they won't generate turbidity at this dock. The dock is a permitted use. And what would you rather have? Constant stirring up of turbidity or or not, in relation to a one-time, dredge event that'll, when I say one time, I mean, it may need to be dredged again in another 10 or 12 years. But that's quite a long time to have something that's very useful for both the owner and for the environment.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, Joe. Mr. Schilling.
A couple of comments. Peter, no offense. I'm sure you were aware of a project in Norwalk called Windward way back in 1971 and 72, as you were scheduled to be a chemical oceanographer for them at one point with Mickey Weiss.
What?
I ended up.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. I ended up working for them in 1972.
The
Studying.
Windward Oceanographic Institute?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I really had nothing to do with that.
Right, that's what I'm making you aware of. I started with them in 1972 doing biological sampling, chemical sampling in the Norwalk Harbor. And I've read your studies, they're incredible. In one of your studies, you mentioned that there, in 1 cubic meter, there's thousands of microinvertebrates in that sediment. If you take that out of an area, you've taken the home away from thousands of organisms. Now, for whatever reason, that could be good or it could be bad. The nice thing about dredging that whole area and making it deeper would be the fact that it's going to keep that water cooler, and oxygen levels will build up in the summer because of the cooler water, because it won't be as shallow. But the downside of that is you are removing thousands of organisms out of the environment, because you're not leaving them here in Norwalk, you're taking them out to wherever the dredging can go. The other thing is the dredging will be moderated by future storms. And what we have learned in the past is we had one storm that moved 4 feet of sediment on top of shellfish beds. Norm Bloom will testify to that. So we know that you could dredge it today, and literally tomorrow, it would be 4 feet shallower. And you have the tides going in and out, which will affect any channel that you put in. So there's a lot of variables involved here. And I don't think there's a simple answer to this whole process. And it's a matter of digesting what is going to happen. And it's a matter of digesting how many other people are going to want to fall in line and do the same thing. And the dredging, unfortunately, I'm concerned about how rapid it will have to be in the future. And realistically, you can counter, well, sea level's rising, so we won't have to worry about that. Yeah, but with the sea level rising, you're going to have more sediment shifting too. So you have so many factors coming into play. We may need more experts on this.
No, interesting. Interesting.
Well, my role in this whole process was just to document what was there currently, right, and what the projected recolonization time will be. I mean, what you say is, this could happen, that could happen. I mean, who knows what could happen, but it's not, that's not my responsibility. I mean, it doesn't make any difference to me what the dredging is for. The consequences of dredging are the same, whether it's for a maintenance dredging like the South Norwalk Boat Club, or whether it's for this project, the consequences are the same. And you're right, there is gonna be a removal of organisms. Organisms will die. There's no getting around that. No matter what the dredging is for, that's a consequence. The question is, will the things come back? Will things return? And that's, again, That's based upon,
But they can't-
based upon experience.
They can't return to a house that's not there.
I don't know what you mean by that.
You've removed their homes. You've removed the sediments that they were living in. So it cannot recolonize. The area around it can.
Well, then how can the South Norwalk Boat Club be recolonized? I mean, I don't understand what the difference is. Dredging is dredging, whether it's on the basis of a residential area or a basis of a boat club.
All right,
We
Jeff.
documented the fact that things have come back to where they were, that you couldn't tell the difference between, if you looked at the structure of the communities that have been dredged with South Norwalk Boat Club and the present situation that's undredged, they're virtually identical. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
All right, Jeff, no, you have to comment. Yeah.
Just a couple of questions, and maybe Dr. Pellegrino, as he did at the Shellfish Commission meeting, could address the letter from the Bureau of Aquaculture. And there was another letter that we received from the Bureau today. And the Bureau of Aquaculture has determined that this proposed project will have an unacceptable adverse impact on shellfish resources.
Well, my response to that is, how could they not have any objection to the dredging of the South Norwalk Boat Club? They didn't have any objection to that. And again, dredging is dredging. I mean, the impacts are going to be the same no matter what the rationale is. So I mean, that I don't understand.
Well, maybe we could have a slower conversation and we could express ourselves okay. But the South Norwalk Boat Club under the Coastal Management Act is a different type of water dependent use than a residential property. The Coastal Management Act identifies a water dependent use and as a marina and these other uses, but they don't treat, and the history of and Mr. Casey can say this or confirm this, historically from the Coastal Management Act, a residential access is treated differently than a water dependent use such as a commercial marina or a boatyard. Now the authority, you can make your assertions, sir, but the authority for impacts on shellfish resources has to be, at least in part, the Bureau of Aquaculture. And they've determined that this is an unacceptable adverse impact. So you can make your argument and disagree, but
I'm just saying, how can they say that the dredging of South Norwalk Boat Club is not going to have any impact on shellfish, which is a much larger dredging project, then this particular project is going to have an impact on shellfish. I mean, I'm not saying, I just don't understand it.
All right. We haven't received any document. I understand this is a pre-application. Oh, you threw that up there. Okay, I was gonna put up an aerial just to see if
this is the area, and this area, I don't believe that there's that this has ever been dredged, and it's also part of the natural shellfish bed of Norwalk Harbor that was designated by the Superior Court in the late 1800s. So there's significant, and it's a good discussion, but there are significant issues with this proposal.
So where's the dredging area that's proposed?
Right in there.
The very edge of this shelf of the mud flat.
Well, there's where the dock structure is.
Right. Is it the north side of the dock structure, the south side of the dock structure? The pile's going to be removed, and the whole thing, is it going back between the groins? I mean, that's my question.
Well, I
And
think
it would connect to the southern boundary of the South Norwalk Boat Club. It's in your package. The plans are in the package.
We didn't receive this. Did we, John?
Yes, we received it a while ago, and there was some issue, Jim, about the way the depths were presented. Maybe you could explain that there was a datum that's used that was odd. Am I correct? Because it seemed like the water depths at mean low water, and I'll have to look at your drawing, are more than what you've just said tonight. But of course the drawing doesn't look like there's much water depth. But the argument being made, and I'll stop talking because the argument being made is that the property owner has a right of 24-hour access to use this dock, and therefore the property owner has a right to dredge, a littoral right to dredge, and it's not going to have a significant adverse impact on shellfish resources. The harbor management plan has a specific policy to protect intertidal resources of significance, including important shellfish resource areas. And we have a letter from at least one of the authorities on shellfish in Connecticut that this is going to have an unacceptable adverse impact, as well as implications throughout the state. And of course, we'll hear from the applicant that this has to be judged on its own merit, and we can't be concerned about the precedent-setting implications.
Jeff, to address some of your comments, the survey that's shown on the plan that William W. Seymour and Associates did is based on NAVD 88. So those numbers that you see there are not based on mean low water. And this is not a intertidal area. This is a subtidal area. You could see on the plans where mean low water is, and it's not in the proposed dredged area.
Can you share that plan with us, Jim? I'll take this off, or?
I'm not too proficient at putting stuff on. I'm not sure how to do that. As far as
I'll search for it while you continue your discussion.
Jim, is that in your proposal?
Yeah, it's in the package I sent you, John.
Let me see if I can, I'll try to dig it out as myself.
And if you can go to, if you find it, go to sheet 5. Okay. That will show where the proposed dredging is in relation to mean low water with all the water depths.
Let's see.
If I could say a few things while that's being searched, because when I started, I want to start with the baseline that this should be reviewed on its merits. And that's not me telling you that. That's the commissioner of the DEP. When confronted with the idea that there was a policy against new residential dredging, DEP pushed back and said, no, we review these on their merits. And that's based on the applicant's right to access water, which includes the right to dredge. If a littoral property owner didn't have a right to dredge, well, then the owner of South Norwalk Boatyard wouldn't have a right to dredge. If that person has a right to dredge, then the Vignoles have a right to dredge. It has to be reviewed in accordance with the policies that apply to coastal management. I do think what we're fighting against here is that the regulators at the state, including at the Bureau of Aquaculture, put their thumb on the scale. Because I can tell you that I reviewed every new dredging application and permit, and not application, but permit that was issued by DEP in the past 10 years. 4 of those were supported by reports like the one you have from Peter, from Dr. Pellegrino. And in those cases, even when the recovery time was 24 to 36 months, when that was Peter's determination, DEP found that it was acceptable. When these projects were closer to actual leased shellfish beds, DEP found that it was acceptable. So the science that we're relying on isn't new science. This is tried and true science that's been accepted over time. Specifically at the South Norwalk Boatyard, in their memo reviewing why they're issuing the permit, DEP wrote, the proposed dredging will occur in a natural shellfish bed. Sediment impacts to shellfish will be short-term and minimal and are acceptable. And remember, that is, and I have the numbers here now in front of me, that's over 172,600 square foot area and 19,200 cubic yards of sediment. So that's how much habitat was removed and found acceptable. You can't say that's fine because it was a boatyard. We have to look at this, each thing individually. As Peter said, why are they finding it acceptable in some uses and not in others? The impacts are the impacts. If the impacts are there, but DEP wants to issue a permit because they feel it's a water dependent use, let DEP make that determination. But for this commission, the Harbor Management Commission, I would say, and I know we're talking a lot about shellfish and you have an interest in shellfish, but as to almost every other policy, the ones we could find that we thought were somewhat relevant in your plan, they're all noted in my letter. They all support dredging here because your policy is to support recreational boating. And that's exactly what this will do. Why, again, I always feel like there's a question or there's a statement like, why should we do this as a commission? I would ask, why shouldn't you do it? Why shouldn't a property owner have a dock that works 24 hours? Why not? If it's not going to have long-term impacts, and that's really, I think, all we're coming down to here. It's not going to affect any other boaters. It's not going to affect the neighbors. It's not going to affect anyone on a mooring. It's not going to affect the channel. It's not going to affect navigation. It's not going to affect eelgrass, not that there's any there, wetlands, any other intertidal flats. Nothing's going to be affected. So we're just talking about the removal of the sediments, which have already been deemed to be acceptable right next door. And so the only reason you would be saying no, that we don't think this complies with our harbor management plan, is because we don't want this property owner to have a dock that's accessible 24 hours a day. And why is that? Why should someone not have a dock if it's completely accessible? If we were in an intertidal flat, in a wetland, eelgrass, we understand, and we understand that those are coastal resources that need to be protected. But in a situation where the exact same impacts were deemed acceptable right next door, and maybe this is the unique situation. Maybe this is the one, unicorn residential property that should be allowed to dredge because it's right next to an existing massive dredged area that has been shown to recolonize, as Peter found in his study. So it will provide the resources needed for the theoretical habitat of the shellfish, because we've shown there's actual no shellfish there. Again, if there was actual shellfish beds, we understand that would be an issue. But all we're coming down to is the temporary 12 to 18 months disturbance of the benthic environment and loss of that community significant enough to find that this project shouldn't go forward.
But John, in essence, it's like going for a variance when there's no hardship. When they purchased this property or inherited it or however they acquired it, they knew what was existing. They have never been withheld the right to have a boat because they have a dock there. The rebuilding of that dock in kind, the same way, is not an issue or a problem. It's what is the norm in that whole corridor and throughout the town of Norwalk. It's not the norm throughout the town of Norwalk to now dredge in every single case on a residential house or area. So
we're not asking for everyone. And I would say this is
you're not, but it's not, again, it's not like a hardship. They didn't buy this property anticipating to put a 60-foot yacht there. They bought it and knowing what they had was an existing dock and it's suitable for the use in the sound. Whatever, if they want to moor out somewhere else or get a slip in a marina for a larger boat, that's their prerogative. But
I guess I would say this, Mr. Chairman, it's not like a variance because there's nothing prohibiting, you need a variance when the zoning regulations say you can't do something. And then you only get a variance if you could show that hardship, that you're being denied a use of your property that you should be able to have. I would say this is more like you bought a house that had a little garage and now you want a bigger garage. You just bought an F-350 and it just doesn't fit. You need a bigger garage, you need a wider, doorway, you need a higher garage, and it doesn't impact, you're not in the setback, you're not impacting your neighbors. And You know, it won't cause any
Garage is in the
long-term
public
impact.
trust.
Yes, John,
Pardon?
but you're talking, John, about somebody's own property. Here, we're not talking about the applicant's own property. We're talking about the public property. And
Talking about the
South
right, the
Norwood-
littoral right to dig channels, because
Yeah,
Jeff,
that's an assertion,
no,
John.
because you can't, Jeff, then no one should be able to dredge. If you're saying this is public property and the Vignault shouldn't be able to dredge because they got good enough, tell that to South Norwalk Boat Club in 5 years when they come back and they say, all the boats are starting to bottom out.
So we'll make no discrimination between maintenance dredging and de novo dredging going forward.
No, you can't do that because the
No, we
statute
can do
for-
that. We absolutely can do that as a finding of the Shellfish Commission. And I don't speak for the commission, I speak for myself. We certainly can find that.
Oh, I think I misunderstood you. I think for dredging projects that come to you, if you believe that they have an impact and your role is to evaluate the impact on shellfish resources, you definitely need to tell DEP and the Army Corps, the agencies that issue the permit, what those impacts are. Then it's up to DEP and the Army Corps to decide if, despite those impacts, it's going to issue the permit. That should be the classification. What I was meant by distinguishing between maintenance dredge and new dredge is that the statutes protect the right to do maintenance dredging, even though, as Peter pointed out, maintenance dredging at next door is going to have the same impact per square foot as new dredging at the Vignault's property because the community has reestablished itself. But I still think it's totally reasonable to tell the regulators that this impact will occur. Let them make the decision. What I don't think it's fair to applicants is to sort of say, we're not going to approve this because as a policy, we don't think someone should have 24 hours, access, or, we think the threshold for environmental impact should be higher at a residential property than at a commercial property. That shouldn't be. You should look at each one individually and say it either has impacts or it doesn't, and then let the DEP decide.
Does the Coastal Management Act consider the waterfront property with a dock as a water dependent use?
There was a decision by a prior commissioner that found it wasn't a water dependent use. And no one challenged that yet. I don't know how you boat from your house without having access to the water, but that was before my time and I didn't represent that person.
But the Coastal Management Act has definitions of water dependent uses.
Right, but they don't exclude residential docks from it.
It's not listed as a water dependent use though, right?
I think it would fall under the broad definition that it's a use that requires being adjacent to the water in order to undertake. I forget the exact terms. I can pull up the statute.
But that's still an interpretation though that to be made. Our thinking here, and they're good questions and issues that are raised, but we're concerned with cumulative impacts, although the property owner, of course, says that we shouldn't be, but that is a responsibility of the Harbor Commission and the Shellfish Commission. And if you take that same argument that a residential property owner has a right to 24-hour access, I think that's an interpretation of a littoral right as well. So if every property owner used that same argument, sure, there may be some where there's an intertidal flat, but that would increase the volume of the dredge material beyond just the little bit that you're talking about here.
But remember, intertidal flats have a special protection. And so even in a existing maintenance dredge footprint, if enough siltation has occurred that part of that footprint is now intertidal flat, DEP won't let you dredge there anymore. You've lost that right. You can't sit on your rights as a holder of a maintenance dredging permit. So it should, it often does go back to an analysis of the impacts on the coastal resources. So
That's correct. Village Creek historically had a larger footprint when it was in Anchorage Basin, and then it was reduced to sort of a marina, and Deep at one point sort of took away some of our historic dredging footprint to what we need for our facility today, and not what it was in 1950 or whenever we dredged.
Well, I think we have a lot of arguments here. I don't mean to, everybody else hasn't had a chance to talk yet, but my feeling is that, that it's a natural shellfish bed designated by the court, that the commission here, yes, it's correct. The harbor management plan certainly calls for protection of littoral rights of access, but doesn't specify that it's a littoral right of 24-hour access or the right to dredge a channel. It's a right of reasonable access that would be determined on a case-by-case basis, at least from our recommendations. And we have a policy to protect significant coastal resources, including significant shellfish resources. The Shellfish Commission has identified this shallow area along the, I'll share my screen once again. This area as a significant shellfish resource, and the Bureau of Aquaculture has done the same thing. So that I think those are the two. Do we agree that the littoral right provides the right to dredge for 24-hour access, and do we take the assertions of the applicant that this is okay over the findings of the State Bureau of Aquaculture responsible for shellfishing? Or for shellfish.
Yes, I would just say, so the determination of rights, it is outside the purview of any administrative agency. A zoning commission can't determine what the scope of an easement is. Neither can DEP. It's only up to a court what the scope of one's rights are.
All right.
But you can rely on what's already been said by the courts of this state. And I quoted that in my letter. And I'm not talking about, in that letter, I'm not quoting from like 1850, where, if you had enough rocks and dirt, you could build a solid fill pier anywhere along the coast, as long as you owned the water. I'm quoting from a case from 1994 that still recognized the right and privilege to dig channels and wharf out from the owner's land in a manner that does not interfere with free navigation. And I'll say it's exclusive yet qualified right and privilege to dig channels. So we all know that you have to get the right permits and you have to meet the Coastal Management Act. That's all we're asking for, is the opportunity, not to be sort of hobbled right out of the gate. Let us make our argument to DEP. If there's, and I could not find anything. I can't quote you, and I'd be curious if you could quote me chapter and verse from the harbor management plan that says we don't allow residential dredging, except maintenance residential dredging. There's no provision in your harbor management plan that says that, and your recommendations have to come straight from your harbor management plan. And I think we've shown that the impacts to the one environmental coastal resource are acceptable. They're temporary, but as Peter's study has shown, it will recolonize. And those studies, as I said, have been relied on again and again by DEP to approve dredging projects. And they didn't even bother asking for such a study for South Norwalk Boat Club. So, I mean,
can we look at the actual scope of this for a minute? I found the diagram in the letter. We've talked a lot about the theoretical impacts here.
I did put an image of it in my letter.
Yeah, and I believe that's what I'm sharing now. Y'all have it? Can you see it? Do you have?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And,
Right.
and Chris, that's why I raised the question to Jim. You see the contours that say -4 and -5.
Right.
Which,
So
which were confusing when we first looked at this. I mean, that's not the condition that exists at mean low water, but
that is, well, like Jim explained, that's in NAVD 88, which, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, the conversion is these numbers are 4 feet different from mean low water, correct?
Actually, 3.7.
3.7, okay.
Yeah. So
3.7.
take those numbers and subtract 3.7, and that's what the water depth is in relation to mean low water.
well, a person that's not real smart, Jim, wouldn't immediately figure that out when they see the line that says mean low water. But I understand.
Yeah.
Well, it says vertical datum on the plan. You know what it was in relation to.
Yeah, and then the mean, and it reads the mean low water line is just above the -4 line. So basically, your mean low water is, I mean, I guess some of those images, I mean, we have plenty of low tides here which are negative, and in terms of mean low water. So you know, a -1 tide is not unusual here, which is probably when those images we were looking at were taken. So what we're looking at is, but you see the -5 line here. That is almost certainly always a wet zone. And then most of the footprint is going off into the side slope of the South Norwalk Boat Club, correct?
That's right.
So this footprint, the footprint you've shown here, well, and I don't know if that dash is the property line and that is actually not what you're dredging or whatever. That's not really at the point. This is your -8 footprint you're showing, because you're going to -8 mean low water, or -11.
Yeah, we're proposing a box cut along that stretch, so it would slough in a little bit after that dredging is done.
So you're gonna cut vertical there and just accept whatever side slope sloughing you get. That.
Right. We want at least enough water for the entire float system to be floating.
Right. I mean, Norwalk mud maybe holds 2 to 1, right? I mean, you're minus.
Somewhere between 1 to 1, 2 to 1. We didn't want to propose like a 3 to 1 slope and cut way into the, further into the subtidal area. We wanted to try to minimize our dredge footprint.
So,
that dashed line you mentioned, that's the upper edge of where the South Norwalk Boat Club dredged.
presumably
Based on their
that's
plans.
Presumably that's their littoral rights line.
Has nothing to do with littoral rights. It's just the edge of their dredge zone.
Okay. So the actual amount of mud flat that is being excavated is this area in here.
Well, it's not mud flat. It's subtidal.
Well, it's mud flat according to those.
Yeah, the area to be dredged is that area, 5,826 square feet.
Well, is it mud flat on a neap tide or a spring tide? I mean, what are we talking about flat? I mean, that's what I'm saying. That at a low, the spring tide, that's mud.
But it doesn't fit the definition of a flat.
All right, I don't know what's the technical definition of a flat, if somebody else can chime in on that.
There's a slope. I believe it's from 0 to 0.5 of the slope.
So, and just, I have the statute in front of me. It's not, I'll start by saying, it's not an intertidal flat because it's below mean low water, but it's very gently sloping or flat areas. And so you can see by the contours, it doesn't meet the definition. Between high tide and low tides, composed of muddy, silty, fine, sandy sediments, and generally devoid of vegetation. but Jim and I have come across this before. DEP typically measures, right, intertidal flats to lowest predicted tide, but we're not in an intertidal flat area, and they've agreed with us that the slope is also of particular significance when determining if something's an intertidal flat.
All right. So we're saying, even though it's mud at low tide, that it's not, the slope is too high for a flat. Is that the?
Maybe Peter can say something about the sediment type, since he did the benthic study. I don't know, did you do grain size, Peter?
No.
Okay.
No.
How would you
No.
characterize the
We
sediment?
just, based on visual observation, I think we characterized it as silty sand.
Okay.
Soft sediment, but we did not do grain size, no.
Well, I don't know what more can be said to obviously the applicant is not swayable. And it doesn't sound like we are giving up our position and how we feel about this.
Well, John, you know what it boils down to? We're in a balancing act here. And I certainly agree with some of the statements that Mr. Bajek and Mr. Casey have been making with regard to, the area and the remediation of this area. But we're caught between a rock and a hard place here in that we need to maintain consistency, other than with some of the points that we bring up with our harbor management plan. Not so much as you pointed out, we're not dealing so much with the owner's littoral rights to wharf out or to dredge in that area, but mostly to protect shellfish resources in the area. And we have a letter from the Department of Aquaculture, and we also have the expert opinion from the Shellfish Commission indicating that this would significantly impact on shellfish resources.
Oh,
So-
I don't mean to interrupt, but actually the Shellfish Commission didn't make a decision. They tabled
didn't
it
make
for
a
their
decision.
next meeting.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I thought, okay. So in any event, our charge basically is to at least to abide by the expert opinion. Right now, all we have to go by is the Department of Agriculture and their decision with regard to the new dredging in that particular area. So our strength, actually, as far as the Harbor Commission is concerned, is to maintain consistency in our thinking with regard to what goes on in Norwalk Harbor based on a harbor management plan. And one of them is to protect, certainly shellfish resources. We have the expert opinion, so to speak, from the Department of Agriculture. I await certainly the expert opinion from our Shellfish Commission. Now it's up to the DEP. Again, we don't have the authority to say, well, we have the authority to say what's consistent and not consistent, but the DEP has the authority to overrule that decision, based on their expert opinion.
Well,
So-
at this point, I'd like to hear what Shellfish may have in addition to add to this conversation, and then I'd like to see a motion get put forward.
Yeah, John, my comments tonight would be entirely my own. So I'd be reluctant to offer things that are beyond my own opinion.
Oh, the meeting that you had, the Shellfish Commission met with Mr.
Correct.
Casey.
And
Oh, I see.
Mr. Casey is correct. It was tabled at that meeting. We
Oh,
will
I
meet
see.
on Thursday.
Oh, so that that was your opinion that was cited as far as okay.
I
All right.
stated
So
it as such.
we want to table it too, waiting for further information from Shellfish, or do we want to put a motion together one way or the other to move this project?
We've done that. We put together a motion pending the comment from Shellfish Commissions. We come across our own policy, and that is our own of protecting shellfish resources. We have one letter based on the Department of Agriculture, indicating their
We have two letters, John, plus their determination in the Bureau of Aquaculture consultation form.
Oh, okay. So just
In all fairness, we saw the first letter. We were unaware. I don't know if Jim, I assume we would have been
I
told
haven't
about it. We aren't aware there was a second letter. We have no idea what that says. We've had no opportunity to respond to it.
I thought Jim alluded to him seeing it today.
Who?
Jim, I thought Jim alluded earlier that he had seen this letter.
No, I've only seen that, the initial letter.
It's essentially, well, we just received it at the end of the day.
Right. So then do we want to?
And we just received the letter from the applicant, from Mr. Casey today too.
Right. Do we want to table this based on?
I make a motion to table this. I'm still confused by all this.
Okay, yeah, because like I said, it gives time certainly for Mr. Bajek and Mr. Casey to review, I guess, that second letter that was sent. I hadn't seen that myself right now because I've been busy with several other things.
All right, is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Dennis. All in favor?
All right. Okay, all right, an aye.
So moved.
All right.
So the table to motion was approved. Any abstentions or?
No, and I'd like to see more documentation on this. All we had was one letter that came this morning that had a fuzzy sketch.
Okay.
All right.
Do you need us to resubmit the consultation form?
No.
With all the plans?
I don't think so.
It didn't filter down to our level, I think, maybe. I don't know.
No, I don't. Jim submitted that months ago.
Yeah, John, you should have that information. Let me know if you don't. I'll resend it to you.
Should we resend it? Is it Michelle?
I sent it to John initially.
Resend it to John, and then based on the fact that we've all, as a commissioners of the whole body, send it out to the whole body, so we can.
All right, we can look at it in its gestalt. I mean, we have Department of Agriculture to consider. We have our harbor management plan to consider.
Correct.
And we have certainly the Shellfish Commission's responsibility.
Well, Shellfish will be meeting next week, and then we'll have their sense of things as a commission, not just Steve's flavor.
I'll put together one whole packet with all that information present.
Okay. All right. Let's move right along.
Jeff?
Might I ask Dr. Pellegrino one about the previous report, which I was looking for? Did you do the report on the, remember it was a long time ago, there was a city proposal to put a marina on the west side of Veterans Park. Did you do that report for Talmadge Brothers,
No.
reviewing that marina proposal?
No. No,
Okay.
I didn't.
Okay. Thank you.
No, I have no idea about that.
Okay.
Okay, let's move right along.
Right.
Chairman's report. As Michelle will attest, her and I are in constant contact regarding meeting up close and personal and live. And we still have not gotten the go-ahead from the city. Also, I would like to break the schedule a little bit because it's part of my report as well. I'd like Jeff to speak on the harbor fees to where we're at, because I have the sense that that's being stalled as well. So Jeff, would you please weigh in?
Sure, thank you, John. So I did have a discussion with Jessica last week. That is, all of that information is going through legal at this particular point in time. They did have some very specific questions about, what we're charging now or in the past. Basically, everything was nothing. They also wanted a clarification on where we expect the money to go. We expect it to go into Harbor Management Commission. For the fees, there was some discussion about having legal discussing, looking at at our management plan to see if we have the right to do what we're trying to do. And if not, then we need to make a change to that plan to include fee structures, et cetera, and then go ahead and have that pass through Common Council and everyone else, and have a public hearing on that.
That's what I'm doing.
So if it is okay, if we can do that, then we can carry on, and that will be, again, go through Common Council and then a public hearing. I have a meeting with Jessica next week, the first week in August, to go over what legal has said.
All right, would you include me on that too? I'll make myself available, Jeff, please.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
All right, and I'm sorry I went out of order. Next is the Harbor Master. Greg?
Yes, sir. All right. So Bruce and I have been patrolling around, and we've found a number of boats that we're trying to check on and confirm that don't have any applications in and whatnot. There's 2 or 3 moorings that were unregistered that we removed so far, and emails have gone out to people that still have not paid but have their boats on the moorings. So that's what we're dealing with now. Then we're also sitting down with Norman going through a bunch of the moorings that need the inspections done. So we're knocking those off as we can. But other than that, that's about it. That's quite a lot, but that's all that we're working on now.
Well, the season is
Greg,
on.
Greg, could I ask a question, Greg?
Sure.
What you just mentioned is sort of all news to me. I would.
Dennis, you're breaking up, Dennis.
Dennis, you're muted.
Dennis, you're muted.
I just, what you said, Greg, is it's something that's new to me. And I was just hoping that maybe you could fill me in on what's happening, because I think I should know, and it would be helpful for me to help you with.
We just been going around like Cops Island, Peach Island, and a couple other spots, just randomly writing down the registrations and checking them in the systems.
No, I understand the process, and I appreciate that, because that's something that needs to be done, because I'm not on the water. But I mean, I constantly peruse the applications to find out if they're paid and everything else. And you said that there was others that were on the hook and they weren't being paid. I'd love to know who that is, and so I could follow up.
One of them that sticks out is Mark Hackshaw. Offhand,
he's been a problem. Yeah,
exactly. Every year it's something with him. That's the only one I can think of offhand at this time. But there's a few also that haven't uploaded their registration and insurance.
Greg, I think you and Dennis should have an offline conversation on this. This is a public meeting, so.
Yep.
Yeah, whenever we have time. Yeah.
Dennis and Greg, if you want me on that, I'm more than willing to help you out on that as well.
Absolutely, Jeff.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. I agree.
Okay, let's we'll catch up with each other and pick a time and we could talk. Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right, Jeff, do you have anything as our consultant that you want to bring into the table? You're muted, Jeff.
If you don't mind, I think we should give some thought to harbor improvement projects that we can seek funding for from the Connecticut Port Authority. So we've been told that the Port Authority, and of course Greg knows this, has authorization from the legislature for, I believe it's $25 million for the small harbors over the next 5 years. Plus they had additional money that wasn't previously allocated. So it's really in our interest if we can start to think about opportunities or projects that we could fund with, or we could seek funding for from that program. And one project that came to mind is a feasibility study if the police department is still thinking in this way, a feasibility study for relocating the Marine Police Base. That was something that the city had discussed several years ago. And we put together a modest study in that regard, but at the time it wasn't funded. So I think we should have a committee if we could, or at least some discussion, because there's an opportunity to apply for a substantial amount of money. We did receive almost $1 million for the visitors dock, if you remember. And that was an application prepared by the Harbor Management Commission. So there's substantial funds available, and other towns now are preparing lists of projects. So we don't want to fall behind in that regard.
All right, and it doesn't have to be one, it could be several, and I think we should have a brainstorming session.
Yes.
And who would like to chair that committee? We have to keep it under 4 commissioners because it's gonna have to be an offline meeting. So I'll take it upon myself as the chair, which will be part of it anyway.
Right.
I'd like to be part of it.
All right, I'll ask Chris and Doc, myself, and Matt.
Yeah, there's FEMA regulations about placing, emergency facilities. They have to be accessible in emergencies. And I've always thought putting a marine police facility in a place that would be inaccessible during, a high water event would not meet that threshold of resiliency that FEMA requires. But I'm not an expert in that.
Well, that means the existing facility is in violation.
Well, I'm not saying that it's not, but good luck getting money for a facility that does not increase resiliency. And veterans.
We just have to build it like a house in Rowayton, that's all.
Well, or at least not a place that's a half a mile that's half a mile into a flood zone.
That was one idea. There should be a number of other ideas too. And the restriction, of course, is that these have to be projects for the public and they have to be on city-owned properties. But I think we should pursue this. And then another comment I might make, and I don't know if the city can help us in this regard, but I went back and looked at the old minutes of the Harbor Commission from 1990 and 91 as part of work on the Water Quality Committee. And there's really interesting information that either people weren't around back then, but as part of that historical record, you'd think that there would be an effort to digitize those old records so that they are available for reference purposes. Because we're going back and revisiting things that we talked about, certainly with water quality, many years ago. So I don't know if that's something that we could ask the city to do, or if the city is normally doing that, or if we could get some funds to have somebody do it for us. But I think having those old records digitized would be a good project. That's my opinion. And another topic is the city is about, if they haven't already, embarked on a waterfront zoning study. We provided some photographs of aerial photos of waterfront sites to them. But I think we have to assert the Harbor Commission's interest and inclusion in that study.
All right, let me ask the people that volunteered for this committee. Is next Tuesday a good date for everyone? Say 4 o'clock in the afternoon?
That's fine for me.
Chris?
Afternoons are not, that's a family time for me. I can make time during the workday. I can make time after 7, but
You're talking August 3rd.
What?
Talking August 3rd, next Tuesday?
Right. Yeah. Does anybody have any issues with late morning?
Yeah, Tuesday mornings I do, yes. From
Early
nine-
after,
from
early,
nine-
af-
from
early
9 to
after,
11.
early afternoon. Jeff,
Early
That's good
afternoon is
for me.
fine with me.
Chris?
Yeah, early afternoon works.
Yeah,
So
that means, yeah. bef-
let's make it next on the 3rd at 2 o'clock work for everybody? 1 o'clock. Let's make it 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock's better, thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to want me to set up a Zoom session?
Now, let's do it up front and personal. Let's do it at my house. It's very easy.
Oh, okay.
I have espressos and plenty of water, soda, whatever here.
All right.
All right.
Send out an email?
Yeah.
And, maybe,
Well, I don't want to give out the address. Well, it's
Yeah,
public.
no.
It's public
No,
record anyway. It's
send-
one.
send an email.
179.
Send us an email with date, time, and directions to your place. Sean. Straight and simple.
You got it. All righty. All right, next on the agenda would be shellfish.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Really quickly, so the last meeting, we indicated that we were completing the consultation for 14 Shore Haven, and we have submitted that to the agent, Mr. Hiltz. We also received the presentation on 26 Shorefront Park, and as I stated earlier, we did table it. We took no action. FYI, despite all the rain, recreational shell fishing reopened on Monday in Norwalk. Permits are on sale at Fisherman's World. Our next meeting is on Thursday. Eat Norwalk shellfish, and I yield back, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dennis, mooring and harbor safety.
Okay, yep, the committee continues to review the renewal applications and we respond to the issues and concerns. We have 61 approved applications and 56 applications under review. We received the final managed field mooring payments from Norwalk Yacht Club and Sprite Island Yacht Club, and they were deposited into our account. Payment for the Row 8 Yacht Club is expected by the end of this week. I was assured that. Under harbor safety, again, we are not aware of any issues or concerns regarding harbor safety at this time. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Alan is not here, so we don't have a financial report. Plans and recommendations. Jeff?
Nothing to report this time,
Okay, other than what you reported already.
other than exactly what I've already.
Okay, newsletter and website, that's Alan as well. I'm sure he'll fill our ears full of wonderful things next meeting. Water quality, Schneiderline and Crespo.
The last meeting we had, we took on the task of putting together recommendations that we'll put together along with a report for 2021 and pass it on to the commissions as well as on to the city. And these are basically issues that I presented to most of you before in the past, all put together in one quick and easy letter. And hopefully people in the city will start taking a look at it and considering some of the issues. Many of these issues you guys have already talked about. Now the city has to do it too. And I'll send you a copy of that when we're finished with the meeting next week. Thank you.
Okay, is there any updates at all for Wilson Point and some of the testing that was done and the issues with all the rain that was had and the outflows? And I know they were doing some stuff themselves internally and the health department was involved in it. Do we have any feedback from any of that at all?
I have not gotten feedback from them other than the fact that the health department is involved and the Department of Public Works has been brought into it. There are several pipes that lead into the salt marsh to the north of Wilson Point. And it was found that that was one of the sources for very high bacteria content, but I was not given specific numbers. And also there is a salt pond that is on Wilson Point that is surrounded by homes. And it's right off of Nathan Hale Drive. That also had, the outflow from that also had very high bacteria content.
But the health department is following up on it.
That's what I've been told, yes.
Anything else, Joe?
That is it.
Joe,
Right.
the bacteria count, is that more coliform? Is that geese? Or they don't know?
As far as I know, it was coliform.
So
What
here-
happened was Dick Harris started it. Dick had asked me to take him back into the area because he had concerns because of the shellfish beds off the shore.
This
you
is
know,
a
south-
septic failure, is it?
Pardon?
Is this part of septic failure perhaps, or no?
As of right now, nothing specific has come forward. The pipes, the storm drain pipes that are in the salt marsh, and the salt marsh drains into the north part of the cove there. Some of those pipes, Peter, Bill was told, come from as far north as I-95. So finding where or what is coming in is going to be a big undertaking. And hopefully I get some feedback before our next meeting as to whether they found anything or not. And as far as leaking septics, that has not been determined, but the fact that the tidal pool is high in bacteria might indicate that. But that no work has been done to track that down as far as I know.
Okay. This is the time for public comment. Is there anyone from the public out there that would like to speak or ask questions or make their presence known?
And they'll just have to raise your hand if you want to speak, and then I can allow you to speak. There's just one person on, I believe it's Linnell.
I don't see anybody.
Yeah, I don't see anyone.
No, there's no one except commission members. And maybe Mr. Bajek still on, Mr. Hiltz still listed being on. Other than that, just commission
Okay,
members.
so having not hearing any public comment, we'll move to the approval of the minutes.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as
As
revised.
amended.
Second that.
Second,
Chris?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? So moved. All right, guys, great meeting. So we'll move to adjournment. Who'll make a motion to adjourn?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded?
Second.
Okay. Good job, guys. Let's move forward and hopefully we'll meet up close and personal next time, right, Michelle?
Yeah, hopefully. It's the goal.
Isn't that what your last email indicated? You know, that,
Yeah, the jury's still out. I
Oh, it
mean,
is?
Oh,
who knows
okay.
with the new Delta and being
Yeah,
a democratic city and state.
I'd settle for in person, but not so up close. Just all the
Not up close.
club lights from all you guys, if
You
that's
still
okay.
have the discretion, if you so desire, to wear your masks.
I'd settle for hybrid meetings.
okay.
All right, guys, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Aye.
Thank you, Michelle.
Ciao for now.